Hello, Florence. Are we ready to continue? I am. I just got out of the shower, dried my hair, ready to read. Here we go. Shenanigans sat. She held up the bag of coffee beans. This isn't Kopi Luwak. Atrocious snorted. Civet coffee? Goodness, no. I only drink the very best. But I thought it was the most expensive coffee in the world, asked Phenomena. It is, but I don't pay for my coffee, dear. I grow my own on a private island in the shade of an active volcano. The ash in the soil makes it for a wonderfully smoky taste. She sipped her drink. I wouldn't swallow any other brand. Shenanigans slumped. Atrocious wasn't lying. You weren't at dinner last night either, Phenomena tried. No. Where were you? Hugging the phone, interrupted Peek, holding a sopping towel in each hand. She was talking to her husband for hours, which was very unkind of her, as she knew I wanted to talk to my husband about some of his investments. So you were the last to use the phone before it was sabotaged? Felicity put a hand to her mouth. Phenomena, are you accusing our cousins of... Most likely I was. Yes, you can check the phone records if you like, said Atrocious. That's what they do in the movies, isn't it? Check phone records? I'm not sure we can do that, she shrugged. Not my problem. Although your cook walked past me carrying a tray upstairs at one point. She can confirm my story. Gave me such a dirty look, too. All I did was tell her to turn down the sheets. You might consider new staff. Atrocious and Peek were without a doubt the most unpleasant people Shenanigan had ever met. It would have given her great pleasure to clap them in handcuffs or put them in the stocks for the rest of the family to throw rotten fruit and vegetables at, as people had done in medieval times. Their innocence would be completely inconvenient. You could have paid someone to kill her, countered Phenomena. My word, what are they teaching you nowadays? Atrocious handed her empty glass to Peek, who carried it over to the sadly emptied bar. Take it from someone who has been on the wrong side of a lot of detectives. When a person is murdered, the very first thing they look for is a motive. Ask yourself, what motive could a person possibly have for killing Aunt Schadenfreude? Flora said people don't like her, put in Shenanigan. Oh, Flora, said Atrocious very scornfully. People don't kill other people just because they don't like them. They do it because they have something to gain from their death, like power, like money. Aunt Schadenfreude doesn't have any money. No. Peek handed Atrocious a fresh drink. She has the house, and if she has the house, she has Vile's hoard, doesn't she? At least until it's found. Legally speaking, the house and all its contents belong to the matriarch or patriarch. That's true of the treasure as well, regardless of who finds it. What? Shenanigan never considered this. Yes, although, Atrocious's eye slid to Shenanigan, there's always a chance the hoard could be found by an enterprising young swift who'll clean out the trove without telling anyone. It felt as if Atrocious was looking right into her. Shenanigan had the uncomfortable feeling that Atrocious understood her better than anyone else she knew. No one in this family would do that, said Felicity stoutly. Some of the scorn finally showed through on Atrocious's face. Vile did. Vile robbed and murdered his family, and many more besides. Oh, he didn't take an axe to all of them, but how do you think he made his wealth? Atrocious shrugged. The hoard is made of gold and silver, yes? But it's also made of textiles and tobacco and mines and machinery and spices and blood. The history of our family, as inheritance could tell you, is one of heroism, intrigue, and adventure. But it's also one of deceit, theft, and plain old nastiness. Shenanigan thought about Gramercy, Cantrip, and Vile, painted in a solemn line beneath the oak tree. She thought of Vile's monument erected on the site where he killed his brother, and still, there were all these years later. Money and power. You want a motive? There's a motive. I'll tell you what I told Gumshoe. Find out who's after the hoard, and you'll find who hurt your aunt. But it's not me. I'd much rather earn a dishonest living. She flicked her fingers. You can leave now, she said. You're all very tiring and reminding me why I don't have children. Felicity retrieved her sketchbook from where Atrocious had been using it as a coaster. As soon as the door closed, her shy smile tipped over into a scowl. I can't believe the way you two behaved in there, she glared. You were just so needlessly rude. Not needlessly, said Shenanigan. Well, I expected this from you, Shenanigan, but Phenomena, you know better. Felicity hugged her sketchbook to her chest. The first time I meet anyone who might appreciate fashion, you can give me advice. Who likes my designs? Who can give me advice on who likes my designs? Stretch that. Who can give me advice? Who likes my designs? And you two go and spoil it. Phenomena and Shenanigan glanced at each other. Neither could bring themselves to tell Felicity the truth, that Atrocious and Peek saw her as nothing more than a little mouse squeaking for their amusement. They're on our suspect list. Felicity closed her eyes. Somewhere very near now was the end of her tether. Of course, your investigation. Have you even visited Aunt Schadenfreude today to see how she is? Shenanigan opened her mouth and then shut it again. In their rush to treat Aunt Schadenfreude's death as a murder, Shenanigan had almost forgotten she was still alive. She banished the twinge of guilt back to the back of her mind. There's no point. She's just as unconscious as she was yesterday. The best thing we can do for her is catch whoever attacked her. Unbelievable, bit out Felicity. You are the most selfish, the most pig-headed. I can't. She turned on her heel and stalked off. She keeps doing that, remarked Phenomena. Atrocious's words followed Shenanigan back to the main body of the house. It was true that Shenanigan had never considered who the treasure truly belonged to, or how Vial had got it. The house echoed with the sound of knocking as people tapped on walls to check for hollow spaces. Even now, she felt the urge to ditch Phenomena and run off to a dim and cobwebbed nook to see what she could dig up. She wondered if this was what her parents felt when they entered one of their beloved historical sites. They were translators, not treasure hunters, but translation could be a sort of treasure if words mean more to you than gold. Maybe this feeling was in her blood, or maybe, Shenanigan's pace slowed, maybe it was in her name. Since she had always thought that treasure fell under the finder's keeper's rule, all her fantasies had involved telling people she had found it so she could bask in her brilliance. But now she knew that she was legally supposed to hand it over to Aunt Schadenfreude. She wasn't so sure what she'd do. Perhaps perform a devious trick for an underhanded purpose, as her definition said. Keep quiet and keep the treasure for herself. It was what everyone was expecting, after all. Is our experiment still going? Asked Phenomena. The one with the mold or the one about your name? The one about my name. Yes, actually, I've been making notes. Phenomena flipped to the back of her notebook where she had drawn up a table. It was titled Nominative Determinism in the Case of Shenanigan Swift, which, as usual, made no sense to Shenanigan. There were two columns. One said in character and the other out of character. There were a lot of marks in the in character column. I'm still gathering data, said Phenomena, to see if you live up to your name. For example, pouring drinks on the floor to annoy Atrocious and Peek was a very in character thing for you to do because you were acting like your definition. Phenomena made a little mark in the column in character column. You trying to ditch the case so you could look for clues about the treasure in Catnip's play. Yes, I know that what you were doing. It was also very in character. Do you see? When all this is over, we'll look at the totals and I can draw some conclusions. Shenanigan wasn't sure how she felt about that. She had agreed to this experiment, and she was still interested in the results, but didn't much like the idea of everything she did being boiled down to either in character or out of character. And if, once the study was over, the in character column had the most marks in it, Shenanigan would have to face the fact that none of her decisions were really decisions at all. Just her moving along the track the dictionary had laid out for her the day she was born. In terms of the case, I think we should next try to corner Aunt Inheritance, Phenomena went on. She was angry with Aunt Schadenfreude for an unknown reason. I'm not sure she likes the way our aunt runs things as matriarch. Maybe she's after the job. If she was going to tell Phenomena about the secret room, now was the time. It could be relevant to the investigation, and if Shenanigan wanted to prove that she wasn't selfish and devious, she should hate what she knew. But she didn't, or couldn't. Sailor's promise or not, her uncle's words had just made her more determined to get inside. She heard his voice in her head. You have to promise me you won't tell anyone. Shenanigan stopped. That voice was familiar, but it was far too high-pitched to be her uncle, and far too loud to be in her head. I'm serious, said the voice. Promise. As this was the sort of thing people expected her to do, Shenanigan had no problem pulling Phenomena back behind the corner so they could listen. I promise. Who would I even tell? The second voice was also familiar. There were two people it could belong to. She had spoken to both only an hour or so to go. The speakers were in the coral bedroom where Daisy and Candor was staying. Shenanigan signaled to Phenomena to wait, and then darted into the coral bedroom's next door bathroom. Climbing on top of the sink, she peered through the peephole behind Mermaid eating a hot dog. The important thing is to stay calm, said Flora, or Fauna. We just have to adapt the plan. Daisy sat on the bed, rubbing her temples. Shenanigan wriggled into a better position and nearly knocked a pair of toothbrushes off the sink. Each one had bristles shaped like half a heart, so when you put them together, they made a whole one. Ugh, she thought, soppy and unsanitary. I know, Daisy sounded wretched, and I know I've got to keep it together, but I just keep thinking, God, what have I done? This'll ruin me, Flora. It won't, because no one is going to find out. Flora perched next to Daisy and patted her gingerly on the shoulder. There. To Shenanigan's and clearly Flora's surprise, Daisy leaned against Flora and laughed wetly. There? Well, I don't know. Flora didn't seem to know what to do with her arms. Comforting people isn't really in your wheelhouse. It's a baseball term, she explained at Flora's blank expression. Right. Thank you, though. Daisy dashed the tears from her eyes and took a deep breath. Seriously, if you hadn't helped me out last night, Shenanigan's ears perked up. Fauna had been at dinner, but Flora had said she'd been in her room all evening reading. Maybe this was her secret alibi. She had been helping Daisy with something. Don't mention it. Flora's hands moved to touch Daisy's, but she pulled back at the last second, aggressively chewing on her nails instead. But now you really need to stop feeling guilty. What's done is done, and we're dealing with it, okay? Okay, yes. The important thing right now is to make sure Candor stays oblivious. Reckon you can do that? I can, Daisy said with a steadier voice. Do you think anyone else is suspicious? Not sure. Aunt Schadenfreude always keeps her cards close to her chest. We've no way of knowing if she told anyone. Daisy sighed. Then we keep playing the game, I guess. Just for a little while. Once this reunion is over, you'll be home free. That's the phrase, right? Baseball. Sure, Daisy hiccuped. I'll get you some water, said Flora. To Shenanigan's horror, she began walking towards her, or rather towards the bathroom door to her left. As quietly as she could, Shenanigan scrambled down from her perch on top of the sink. She opened the door to the corridor just as Flora opened hers, but in the second it took Flora to enter the room, Shenanigan had slipped out and silently shut the door behind her. That was a close call. Chapter 15, Passed as Prologue. Trust is not something you have or do not have. Trust is something you give, precisely in small measures, teacups and egg cups at a time. For example, Shenanigan trusted Cook to feed her and care for her every day, but she didn't trust her not to tell Aunt Schadenfreude about her smearing Felicity's lipstick on the statues. She trusted Phenomena to know the answer to any math problems, but she didn't trust her not to start a fire in the lab. And she trusted her parents to love her no matter what, but she didn't trust them to make it to her next birthday party. That morning, Shenanigan had poured a teacup's worth of trust into Flora, and it was as if Flora had poured it all over the floor. The betrayal she had felt was new and awful. She had known Flora was hiding something. She had seen it in her face. But now she knew it was something to do with Daisy and a guilty secret. And Shenanigan would have had to be very bad at math to put two and two together and not come up with Daisy shoved Aunt Schadenfreude down the stairs and Flora helped her to cover it up. Shenanigan hadn't had time to form much of an opinion about Daisy, other than her natural distrust of someone who wears matching jewelry. But Aunt Schadenfreude had seemed pretty determined that Candor end their engagement, to the point of outright forbidding their marriage. Though Daisy had played innocent, she clearly knew the reason Aunt Schadenfreude was so opposed to the match, and it was a bad one. Now she and Flora were wondering whether she had told anyone else. Atrocious had said that all murderers had a motive. It sounded as if Daisy had one. With Aunt Schadenfreude out of the way, Daisy would be free to marry Candor, and Flora would be free to not eat her peas? Shenanigan hadn't thought that part out yet. Well, said Phenomenon, and then didn't say anything else until they were in Aunt Schadenfreude's study. Cook sat in a chair as close to the desk as she could manage, reading ghost stories aloud to Earth. Phenomenon began firing off questions with determination that would have made the gumshoe change careers. Daisy wasn't at dinner. Why? She was feeling ill, said Cook. Candor said she had a migraine, and he had to see to dither, so I took her up a tray. Right, and what time was that? About 7:30. What does about mean? I need exact timings, in numerals, if you please. Well, I don't know, Phenomenon. 7:30, roughly? Did you pass Atrocious on the phone? Yes, that stuck up. And Daisy, how did she seem? Not well. She thanked me and asked if she could borrow something to read, but all I had were my ghost stories, and of course the library's locked, though why'd she think it was a good idea to read with a migraine? Phenomena turned abruptly to Shenanigan. And what time did you see Daisy running down the corridor? A few minutes before 9 p.m. What does a few minutes mean? And was she running away from her room or back towards it? Back towards it. From? How am I supposed to know? Phenomena snapped her book shut with a huff. You are both useless, she said. Then, seeing their faces, added, at very specific things, at this specific thing. You are useless at this specific thing. Shenanigan understood this process must be frustrating for Phenomenon, who treasured exactness. Shenanigan didn't need exact. At a few minutes before 9 p.m., Daisy had run past Shenanigan in the corridor, reappearing in the doorway to the study 15 minutes later. She could have shoved Aunt Schadenfreude, run back to her room to hide, and then pretend she had just woken up when Schadenfreude's unconscious body was brought upstairs. Now she was having hushed conversations with Flora and worrying about looking suspicious. As far as Shenanigan was concerned, this was an open and shut case, and she was ready to throw the book at Daisy. The book, in this case, being the dictionary, which weighed as much as Shenanigan herself and could likely do some serious damage. She could barely look at her aunt lying on the desk. Each time she did, she had a horrible, swooping feeling, as if she had missed a step somewhere inside. Schadenfreude's chest rose and fell so slowly it was hard to even tell she was breathing, and the only noise she made was the faintest wheeze out of one nostril. Shenanigan couldn't help but feel that the longer the person who did this was allowed to walk free, the more Aunt Schadenfreude would fade away, until only her shapeless black clothes would be left. "What if we take too long?" she asked quietly, and hated how small her voice sounded. "What happens if whoever did this comes back to finish the job?" Cook took an iron candlestick from the table. With the barest grunt of effort, she twisted it into a pretzel. "That," she said. All right, my lovey, let's stop there. I love you. Until we read again.